Reality. 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 Boy, write the word down. Reality. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. The power and the understanding of reality. Reality is such an incredible word, saints. In this day and for the kingdom of God, boy, do we need to really, really grab this word reality. Created in the image of God, man was given limited yet distinct, inherent powers God gave to man. He was granted the power to imagine as well as the faculty to define and establish reality. So you have both aspects of the human makeup of man. You have the ability to imagine and dream. How many of you thank God for imagination? It's a good thing. Yet at the same time, God granted us the power to define and gave us faculties of mind to define and then establish reality out of the imagination. Now that's a very complex thing to happen, is that people like Walt Disney, he imaged a thought of what it would be like to have a duck and a mouse have its own kingdom. And he had an image of that. He had an imagination. Come on. Because he had that imagination, God gave him the faculty to move it from that imagination into a place of defining and establishing it into reality. How many of you know a lot of people today have image or imagination, but they are never able to articulate or to bring it into form and shape so it becomes that which is established? There's a battle that goes on. Now we have to understand that anything that comes from God is attached to a battle. Please hear me today. Anything that comes from God is attached to a battle. Nothing that you have or will experience in God will be devoid of a battle. Every single thing you get in God has a battle. Calvary, tell me it won a battle, saints. Tell me Calvary won a battle. Everything we do is a battle. We see that the essence of spiritual warfare, remember nothing comes without warfare, is in who will define reality. If you wanted to say to me, what's spiritual warfare? Spiritual warfare is really the defining factor of who's going to define reality. Kingdom of darkness or the kingdom of God? Listen to me, get in this book, read this book. I've been reading this book since I was 22, I guess. And I can tell you, I thank God for the understanding of this word, because when I'm sitting with presidents of nations or congressmen or senators or anybody in between, bankers and presidents of banks, I have an understanding that I did not get from the secular world, but I got from the kingdom of God, that gives me ability to understand and discern the hour and the moment of the time that I'm standing in. So in the moment you need an answer and you need the correct answer, thank God you have a foundation in the Word of God. So you young college folks, when your philosophizing professor tells you something odd, like you came from monkey, you can say, hold on a minute. It ain't in the book, so I don't believe it. Well, yeah, but the book was written by men. Sorry, the book was inspired by God. Now reality is all of a sudden being contested. How many of you know, saints, this book is the reality that is confronting the age of this world. The God of this world, he is confronted by the reality of this book. How many of you hear that? And if you don't make this book your absolute reality, then you'll pick up philosophies of every kind of strange thing, and you'll walk in those strange things. Are you listening to me? Now, the devil wants us to believe and accept his view of life, his view of Christianity, as though division, sin, and spiritual impotency were the ultimate reality, and God has provided that God has provided for us as believers. The devil has sold the church on the fact that the church can't do nothing. How do angels and demons, angel and demon beings, who do not die from wounds, how do they wage war? With what do they do battle? It says they were, Michael and the angels are fighting the dragon and all the demons. With what? And they can't be wounded. They can't die. Oh. And how do they conquer one another? Here it is. All spiritual warfare is waged over one essential question: who will control reality on the earth? Heaven or hell? When it comes to angelic and demonic warfare, the battle rests not in the physical weaponry, but in the power of agreement between mankind and the spiritual realm. It's all about displacement. How many of you here? The battle that goes on today, saints, in the spiritual realm is about the displacement. The fact that you and I have an agreement with God, with heaven. In reality, we are displacing Satan's stronghold in the earth every day. When you fight against principality and powers, what can you do? Pull out a sword and kill them? You can't kill them. They can't die. How do you defeat the principalities and powers of wickedness? You displace their power and their authority and replace it with reality of these signs shall follow them that believe. You start replacing the demonic strongholds by walking in the reality of the power of God and the Word of God in your mouth. So when you quote the Scriptures and rehearse what God says, then you bring reality into a non-real world. Satan is a liar. He's the father of lies. He can't tell the truth. So everything he says, when he says you're going to die, you need to shout and say, I'm going to live. When he says you're not going to make it, you need to shine like the star on the sky in the night. You should say, hallelujah, what God hath begun in me, he will finish. Every day, the more of reality that you quote and live, the more you displace the authority of the demonic presence of Satan and his hordes of angels. The more you speak the reality of God's word, the less he has in authority to take dominion over the earth. We need to fight today for the reality of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Churches no longer preach about hell. Churches no longer preach about suffering or the cross. And if you preach about death, the death of your soul, the death of your flesh, if you preach about that in many churches today, you're put down, you're shoved aside, because people only want to hear how they can be blessed, and then blessed on their bless. Let me hear me. And that is not the reality of this book. This book is a bloody book. And it is by the death of one man that we all have salvation. Come on. And I'm tired of hearing the self-help preachers always preaching about how we can help ourselves. There are times in life that you can't add a hair to your head. Come on. When the doctor says it's the big one, there's a third opinion, and that's the Holy Ghost. And you and I need to know that, and we need to have our feet and our foundation fully grounded in the reality of this book. Now, the devil, Satan, wants us to agree and thereby reinforce his deceptive view of the church. You see, in the church is so dumb, the church goes into agreement with this mess. And the church starts preaching against itself. Because the church gets a wild grass piece of doctrine, it starts defining things, and we start defining what the church is, and then later have to come back and say, oops, we're sorry, we made a mistake. Just like all these guys that were writing these great books, and they were talking about the seeker-friendly church was the way God was going. Well, the guy that started it had to come back and write a book. Oops, I made a mistake. But he'd already influenced millions of people. How many of you know how many years have we gone backwards by people in the church trying to define the reality of this book by using humanism or using feelings or using emotions to define the truth of this word? How many of you know there's a war going on whether you think you're in it or not? I don't care if you have a clue. You could be the deadest person, deadhead in the world, and have no sensibility of spiritual things and never have a day that you realize there's a war going on around you all day long. And some of us are so ignorant to the things and ways of God, we don't realize that the war's going on around us and we're in it. We're in the war. And many times we're aiding and abetting the enemy. When we don't understand spiritual warfare and how it should really be engaged, we oftentimes are on the enemy's side engaging it, and we're not aware that we're helping, abetting the enemy. Now, remember this whole thing. Go back to Revelation, remember it now. It's all about displacement. You and I need to stand up today as Christians and move into every arena of life and displace the enemy's stronghold, where he's held it uncontested. Now, our victory never comes from emotions or intellect. Our victory comes by refusing to judge by what our eyes or our ears hear, and by trusting what God has promised will come to pass. You see, your victory is not based on what you see or feel. It's based on, did God promise? Did God tell you? Hello? I've said it 100 times, 1,000 times. When my daughter had cancer at 15, I had a word from God. And I knew that she wasn't going to die. And the doctors told us she could possibly die. And I knew she wasn't. My reality was not shaped by John Hopkins. It was shaped by the promise that God had given me. My income is not based on these idiots in Washington that can't do anything but fight because they don't have the Prince of Peace in their midst. My economy is not based on their foolishness. It is based on this book that tells me my God supplies all of my needs according to his riches and glory. For I've never seen the righteous forsaken or his seed out begging for bread. For my God is well able to do above and beyond what I could ask or think. The minute I slide into the world and Lucifer's tricks, then my world becomes worry, fear, doubt. Come on. And self-absorption, because now, oh my God, how are we going to do? How are we going to pay? How are we going to do? And how are we going to do? What are we going to do here? What are we going to do there? Oh my God. Instead, you step back a minute and say, Lord, you're my source. Somebody says to you, why are you so happy? Why are you so calm? Because I'm not trusting in what my flesh can do. I'm trusting in who my God is.